But I want to move on to the Middle East. We had the questions, around Israel. We saw Joe Biden this week, I thought, being very strong on Israel and its right to defend itself. Was there any discussion between Albanese and Biden on this? And does that put Albanese in a funny position, given the problems he's been having in Australia with his Labour caucus on Israel?
Well, look, I think the two leaders share the same problem, that there's a small element in both of their left-wing parties that are very pro-Palestinian, and they do exert some force. Indeed, you saw the president just a few days ago at his joint press conference. I think for the first time he was mildly critical of Israel, well, at least of the settlers anyway. He said that it was pouring gasoline on the fire, so to speak, to be expanding further into the West Bank, and that's the first time that he said something like that. He also reiterated the US's support for a two-state solution. So I thought that was kind of a move away, a small step back, if you like, from his stronger address a week ago. Look, I'm sure they talked about it. I mean, Australia, as you know, is a very strong supporter of kind of whatever the US does globally, and certainly we're providing humanitarian aid, just as we are with Ukraine. So I don't think the US is upset with our position.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And finally, I want to ask about this horrible shooting in Maine. And there's a whole lot of questions being raised about it. I mean, we have at least 18 dead at this stage, maybe more. The shooter, the alleged shooter, apparently was an Army reservist who told Army doctors and was briefly hospitalized about saying that he'd heard voices basically telling him to shoot up the Army base. At the same time, you've got Kamala Harris now using this to say, well, the U.S. should have an Australian-style gun ban, and she spoke quite forcefully saying that the U.S. should go down that road, which I'm not sure how they would ever practically do that. How are the politics playing out on this, and is this going to be more than just, another one of these mass shootings that comes up, happens, and then people move on to the next thing?
Well, look, certainly, these shootings are all too frequent, and it's a great tragedy. It's a shocking atrocity, and to some extent it overshadowed the last part of the Prime Minister's trip. But yes, every time something like this happens, it's almost immediately politicised, whether it's the race of the shooter or the policies of the state. And so straight away here, you've seen a lot of people blaming the Republican Senator Susan Collins from the state of Maine, because apparently a few years ago she didn't support tougher rules around gun purchase. But look, I think it's very unseemly to do this. So even though it happens all the time, trying to draw a bow between a particular rule and then some psycho out there in the community who's just done this shocking thing. So look, I mean, it's not going to change US policy. As you alluded, there's going to be no change, no substantive change. The reality of the United States is that there's hundreds of millions of guns floating around, and the horse is well and truly bolted, I think, for gun control. I mean, you can try at the edges, but sadly the US has got itself in this position where you have a massive country, a massive population. What is it, 340 million, and even a small percentage of psychos are going to, will obviously cause a lot of damage periodically. It's a shocking tragedy.